Joining me now is Barry Rosen. Barry was captured in 1979 during the Iran hostage crisis and held for more than a year. Barry, I'm just wondering if it's hard for you to watch the coverage of hostages taken from Israel.
Absolutely. I really feel for every one of them. And when I saw one of the elderly women come from the ambulance, I could see how the impact it had on her life. And being a hostage is something that only very few of us have experienced, but it's an incomparably impossible and wrenching situation for one's life.
You know, I'm watching the expressions on your face, and you were taken more than 40 years ago, and still I can tell the effect that it had on you so many years later. How old were you at the time you were taken?
At the time, I was in my mid 30s.
Your mid 30s. And when you were taken, what's the first thing you remember about the moment you were taken?
Um, I couldn't really believe that the student terrorists actually carried that out. You know, there were possibilities, and we talked to Washington about it, but the idea of actually being taken hostage was really not within our ken at all. And once that happened within several hours, I knew that we would stay there for a very long time. Ayatollah Khomeini said to everyone in Iran that now these American spies, the John A. Lawsusan, the nest of spies, would be now taken hostage for Iran.
How did you know, or why did you feel like you would be taken and kept for so long?
The situation was getting worse and worse every day. And then there was a demonstration that occurred on November 4th. And once that occurred, I saw people jumping over the walls of the embassy. And before I knew it, my office was knocked down. The door was opened up. And there I was face to face with one of the terrorists who had a gun to my head. And from that time on, I spent 440 miserable days in Iran. And the photos you're showing right now is an act put on by the terrorists to show, quote, their humanity. And there I am speaking to my mother and my brother at that time and my family. But I was under duress all the time.
How did those hostage takers treat you? Did you have food, medical care? Were you held in a group or alone?
It was always a mixed situation. Many days I lived in darkness. I was tied up, force fed, tied, and then moved from place to place, and then eventually landed up in the worst prison in all of Iran, Evin prison, where most of the political prisoners and American and other hostages are now being held in Iran.
Did you lose hope?
Oh, every day seemed like it was an impossibility to get it free. And I counted every day of the week, day in and day out. I can tell you that this is an issue that I think that many people have to understand. Yes, when you get free, it's one thing, but the situation, the psychological trauma stays with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
PTSD comes and goes all the time. So I really urge people to understand that when a hostage is returned home to his family, there needs to be lots of sensitivity and psychological care for that individual.
Can you give me an example of what you mean by that? Because I'm sure there are certain sounds or smells or sights that trigger those memories for you. If you could just lay that out in a clearer way so we will understand when these hostages, if they get to come home, what that's like for them.
Well, whenever there's a loud noise, a screeching noise, I can jump from that. That reminds me of the prison door that's opened up, and there I was waiting my life. What would happen to me? Once that door was open, the guards could do anything they wanted to me, and they did. So that's one thing. The idea of actually walking outside
The one person who
is
has
a
authority over the
situation
students
that
is Ayatollah Khomeini.
sometimes
The
it becomes
79-year-old ruler made an unusual appearance
the
at the
most
Congress
pleasurable
Hall
thing in my
last
life,
week,
but at the same
suffering
time,
from a heart
it
attack.
makes me feel that I want to be there because I was denied that possibility of seeing something green, something beautiful in my life. And when I see my children today, I think of what pain they had gone through, and my wife, who stood by me all those years, and to see what misery they went through. And the idea of really trying to actually deal with more or less mundane issues sometimes becomes very overwhelming.
Yeah. Insurmountable.
Insurmountable. Yes, that's a very good word for it.
Were you ever aware when you were being held of the efforts on the outside to free you?
No. They, hostage takers blacked out every bit of news. In fact, the only news I ever got was the Washington Post boat section. And in that boat section, I would dream that I was taking a ride on the Chesapeake Bay.
What would,
There is,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
look, I'm waiting for you.
What would you say to the families, and there are so many of them, waiting today for their loved ones, hoping that they are going to be free?
Never give up hope, for one thing, but also speak out vociferously to your own government and to the general public. Put pressure on the Israeli government and every possible negotiating entity possible. Qatar, Egypt, wherever possible, make it known. You know, I have to say thank you, Canada. Thank you, Ken Taylor, for saving 6 of our former hostages at that time. And if it weren't for Canada, those 6 people would have joined us as hostages. And I thank Canada for doing what it did for us.
We know some of the family members are already worried that their stories are being pushed back and not heard. Their voices aren't being heard now that we're past that 2-week point. Really sustained attention is you think what's needed.
Absolutely. And, you know, I belong to an all-volunteer former hostage association called Hostage Aid Worldwide. And we've been involved in some of the meetings and organized sessions with the families of the former hostages. And there, several families are here in New York, and I'm and my organization, we're trying to assist in any way possible.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of people that want to do everything they can to resolve what's going on in the Middle East. Barry Rosen, great to have you, sir. I'm so sorry about what you had to experience all those years ago, but thank you for sharing that story today.